Dre all day.
You're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, give you a little bit more, which is actually a whole lot more. This is the personal initiative, go-getter energy that moves me, you, and anyone else out there to go make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together in one package. What you get is the mindset, the method, the philosophy, the book, the show, known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is when in doubt, take the risk. When you're not sure which option to take, when you're not sure which direction to go, when you have a few different ways that you could take things, take the way that may involve a little bit more risk. That's the offer that I'm going to give you here today. That's the argument that I'm going to make here today. And of course, I'll explain that when we get into our points as always. But we understand that every one of our lives and every life of everyone else out there is but a combination of the decisions that we make. If you want to know how your life has become what it is right now, all you have to do is examine your past decisions. And if you want to know what your past decisions were, if you can't quite remember what they were, all you got to do is look at your current life and you'll see a result of those decisions. So we all understand that since our lives are made up of the decisions that we make, the decisions that we have made, rather, the decisions that we make now in the present will determine what kind of life we end up living in the future. And we make more decisions every day than you would probably even think that you make. We make a whole lot of decisions unconsciously that we don't even have to think about, which saves us a whole lot of energy, saves us a whole lot of time, and saves us a whole lot of physical energy. And oftentimes we end up making a whole lot of decisions by default that are the safe close quote decision. These are the decisions that will not disturb anyone. They will not disturb us. They're the decisions that keep us anonymous, don't draw attention to us, that is. They keep us in the background in some way, and they render us easy to forget, easy to pass over, easy to not pay much attention to. And there's a reason for us doing this, because making safe decisions, not necessarily a bad thing. What it does is it keeps us out of any possible trouble on a moment by moment basis, maybe even a day by day basis. But there's a bigger trouble looming when we keep making the safe decision over and over again in our lives. And understand that many of the decisions that we make are decisions simply because we have an option. Right? If you don't have any choice, then you don't really have to make a decision. You understand it, right? A decision means you're looking at, I could do this, and then you choose one. A decision involves some form of choice. It implies that there's a choice being made. Now, if you don't have any choices, then you don't really have to make a decision. You're just going with whatever you got to go with because there's pretty much nothing else that you can do. But we make the safe decision, the one that is less risky, the one that's not going to disturb anyone, won't disturb us, the one that won't draw too much attention to us, the one that keeps us in the background, easy to ignore, easy to forget. The reason why we do this is to stay out of trouble. The bigger trouble, though, when we keep making these safe decisions is that we very rarely do anything that would make us stand out. We rarely do anything that would make our minds jump to action because we're not doing everything we're doing is safe. I mean, think about that. If everything you did over the course of your day, your week, your life was just a safe thing, what reason would your mind ever have to just wake up and jump to action and really be on its toes? You would never have a reason to do that because everything you're doing is safe. Everything you're doing is low risk. There's nothing that you're doing that you have to keep yourself focused and on point because if things go wrong, what's the worst that could happen? Probably not much because what you're doing is safe anyway. You made a safe decision. The challenge with making too many safe decisions that we never realize until it's too late, we can't change anything because we made so many safe decisions that we backed ourselves into a corner of safeness. This is the trouble that creeps up on us when we never take any risks in life. Today, we're talking about what those risks could be and how you can strategize to take those risks more often in your life. Point number one, today's topic again is when in doubt, take the risk. In episode number 389, the topic was you cannot dunk without jumping. In other words, if you don't like to take the risk of leaving your feet and jumping into the air, it'll probably be, unless you're a really, really tall individual, it'll probably be impossible for you to ever dunk a basketball. And in basketball, for those of you who are not followers of the sport, Dunking is kind of like is a credibility piece. It's a rite of passage for a basketball player to be able to dunk a basketball. It's just something that you can do that most people can never do. A lot of people who play basketball can't do, but if you can do it, it makes you special. It separates you from a whole lot of other people who also play the game, but they can't do that one thing, which is dunk a basketball. But the thing about dunking is the only way most of us will ever be able to dunk, unless you're 8 feet tall maybe, you have to leave the ground. You have to jump. And there's a risk involved in jumping. I think we can all agree that it's much safer, even if you don't play sports, you can agree that it's much safer to just keep your feet planted on the floor than it is to jump up in the air. Because see, when you jump up in the air, you're generating a whole lot of force. You're asking your body to propel you up. You're going to try to dunk the ball. Maybe you'll make it. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll bump the ball into the rim and fall on your ass or fall on your back because you tried to dunk, and maybe you can get injured that way. Maybe when you jump, you might blow out your Achilles or blow out your knee, one of the ligaments in your knee, because you're trying to create so much force. Maybe you'll injure your back or injure your ankle on the way down. Maybe you'll land on somebody's foot. Maybe somebody else will jump when you try to dunk and they'll block your shot and send you crashing to the floor. Maybe when you land, it'll just be so much force that you injure your lower back or something happens to one of your other extremities. Anything can happen when you jump up in the air that could never happen if you just kept your feet on the ground. In other words, for you to dunk a basketball, you have to take the risk that you could possibly get hurt in between the time that you leave the ground and the time that you come back down to the ground. Because the force of gravity is pulling you down towards the ground at a speed of 9.8 meters per second. There's a risk that you got to take to dunk a basketball. But the thing is, you can never dunk without taking that risk. And this first point that I'm making here today is I want you to understand that the most coveted rewards that we all want in life, they all require a risk. Any reward that does not require a risk is not a coveted reward. It's a reward that nobody really wants. Nobody really cares about it. Maybe if somebody gets it, it's cool, but they're not that excited about it simply because there was no risk involved in achieving it. Any award or reward rather that does not involve a risk in order for it to be achieved has very little value. Why? Because anybody could get it. We don't value things that anybody can get. We value things that not everyone can get, not everyone can go after, and even if people try, they still won't be able to achieve it. That's why dunking is dunking in basketball, because not everybody can do it. Even the people who play, even the people who try really hard may never be able to do it. That's what makes it valuable. The fact that you can and they can't. Any reward that does not involve a risk, everyone would have that reward, and subsequently the value of that reward would diminish greatly to the point that there was very little value because it's too easy to get. The circulation of a reward or of anything, too much circulation of anything makes the value go down, makes the price go down simply because everyone can get it. What makes something valuable is its exclusivity. Luxury goods, the fact that some company puts out a pair of sneakers, but they limit the number of sneakers that are actually available. That's what makes them valuable. The fact that not everybody's going to be able to get it, even if you have the money, even if you wake up early and stand in line, even if you try to set up your computer to be able to order it at the exact minute that it's available, everybody can't have it. And that's what makes it what it is. There are jobs out there in the world that are very valuable jobs, not because the work is necessarily so great, not because the job maybe not even in itself be that rewarding to anybody in a general sense. What makes a lot of things in life, whether it be a job, whether it be some product or service, whether it be some idea, whether it be a person, is the fact that it's exclusive. The fact that everybody can't get to it, but maybe everybody wants to, but not everybody's going to get a chance to. The exclusivity of a reward is what makes it valuable. And risk makes things exclusive simply because us human beings, for the most part, we are very risk averse. We try to stay away from risk. We want to stay safe. We want self-preservation is one of our main jobs as human beings. We don't want to put ourselves in a line of risk too often because we can end up getting hurt. We can end up losing something. We can end up, anything can happen. Anything that we don't want to happen can happen when we take risks in life. The problem with not taking any risks, though, is that we don't achieve anything that is of high value to us. And I would say that's a very boring life. I mean, I wouldn't know from firsthand experience, but maybe you do. You can tell me. Point number 2. Today's topic is when in doubt, take the risk. What you should do in order to get yourself more comfortable with this risk-taking idea that I'm giving you here, because listen, even though you may start taking more risks, that doesn't mean things can't go wrong. And it also doesn't mean that you won't still in your mind feel a little bit of apprehension about any risk that you might take. You should feel some apprehension when you're taking a risk. If you don't feel any apprehension, there might be something wrong with you. You should feel a little bit of apprehension every time you do something that could possibly lead to some kind of outcome that you don't want, and you know that you're doing it on purpose. So what I suggest you do is this exercise that has come to be known as fear setting. Everyone here has heard of goal setting, right? Goal setting is when you figure out or decide on the things that you want to achieve, and then you come up with some type of plan or strategy to achieve that outcome. Fear setting is the same thing, but it's not a strategy for you to come up with ways to make yourself afraid. What fear setting is when you look at the things that you are considering doing that are risky, you know that they're risky, and then you figure out, all right, how can I handle this risk? How can I handle the fear that I am feeling regarding this risk? And what could I do should this risk turn out as terrible as it could possibly turn out? The worst case scenario, what can I do if that actually comes to fruition? How likely is it to happen? And then what can I do if it does happen? Fear setting is a logical way of assessing risk before you take the risk so that you can reasonably justify your taking of the risk. So this right here, I'm giving you an out clause. Any of you who's kind of antsy when it comes to risk taking, maybe you're once bitten and twice shy. You've taken some risk before and it ended up in a negative outcome for you. It really ended up hurting you or setting you back in the long run. I'm not saying that that's not possible. It is very damn possible when you're taking risk. So maybe now you are very, very antsy when it comes to risk taking, and you're not really trying to follow anything that I'm saying here today, at least as far as you've heard so far. But let me tell you your out clause for, again, the fact that you've gone through you got a bad history when it comes to risk taking, or at least you think you do. You really don't, but you think you do because recency bias. All you need to do is the fear setting exercise. So the questions you ask yourself is, first of all, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst possible outcome if I were to take this risk? If I go do this thing that I'm thinking about doing that I consider to be risky, all right, what makes it risky? What's the worst possible outcome? Write it down. Write down every element of the worst possible outcome of any risk you are considering taking. Then the next thing you got to ask yourself is, let's just say that this worst possible outcome occurs. Can I recover from this worst possible outcome, and how would I recover from the worst possible outcome? Those are the next questions you ask yourself. That's a two-part question there. Can I recover, and how would I recover if it happens? And you may have more than one answer to that question. You should have more than one answer to that question, just in case the one way you're thinking of recovering doesn't work. Now at least you got a couple other options. So can I recover, and how would I recover? The next question is, look at the potential payoff. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum for this risk. What's the potential gain that I stand to acquire should this risk work in my favor? What do I get? What is it? Then ask yourself, is the potential payoff, that best case scenario, is it bigger than the payoff of the less risky option? So if I was to take an option that's a little bit less risky, a little bit less bold, puts me in a little bit less danger or position of possibly failing, what's the payoff for each? And proportionately, what's the difference between the two? So for the really risky option, you got to put up this much effort, this much time, or whatever it is, and you're going to get this much result. Then you're going to compare that to how much time, effort, or whatever input you had to give for the less risky option. What kind of result you get there? Which one, again, weighing that the opportunity cost of both on the positive side and the negative side, which one is actually worth more? What's the expected probability of either one happening, and then what's the expected ROI, the expected value of each option? Should they work out and should they not work out? So if you figure, after your calculations there, that the potential payoff of the more risky option is bigger, weighing the probabilities and the opportunity costs and the potential payoffs against the less risky options or the safe options, if it looks like it's bigger, why not take it? Why not do it? If the payoff will be bigger and you could possibly recover from the possible loss, what do you have to lose? So if you're lazy and you're not going to do the probability calculations into what you're doing, maybe the risk is, maybe this situation that you're looking at is not that serious that you need to do that much work. Maybe it is, but if it's not, and you just want a simple question to ask yourself, here it is. If the payoff will be bigger for the more risky option, and you could recover from the loss if this risky option does not work out, what do you have to lose? That's a question that you should answer. That's not a rhetorical question. That's a question you should answer. What could I possibly lose? This is all part of the fear setting process. The better you can do fear setting, the easier it will be for you to do things that scare you, the things that you're a little bit anxious about, the things that you may feel are maybe a little bit too risky for you to take action on because all you can think about is the worst thing that could possibly happen. That's why you do the fear setting exercise. You can put fear in a box. You can put fear in its place. You can put fear in perspective. Fear is one of the strongest emotions that human beings feel. It's hardwired in us to keep us safe and keep us alive, right? So, and what happens is, because it is what it is and because it's hardwired into us the way that it is, we allow fear a disproportionate amount of say when we're making decisions. When we think of the possible outcomes that we fear could occur from taking an action, we allow the fear possibilities to scream and yell at us a lot louder than the success possibilities, simply because by succeeding, we succeed. We add more to what we have. We get better. We get whatever reward we get. But if we don't listen to the fear and that fear thing ends up happening, we could lose our lives. Unconsciously, we're thinking that. For the most part, most of us are not risking our lives with any action that we take on a day-to-day basis. Doesn't mean you couldn't lose it, but we're not, what's the word? We're not, by design, let's just say, purposely putting ourselves in a line of possibly losing our lives. Now, we could lose money, we could lose friends, you could lose face, you could lose reputation, you could lose a whole lot of things. You could lose your job. There's a lot of things you could possibly lose, but we're probably not putting ourselves in a line to lose our lives most of the time with the things that we're doing in life. But because fear is such a strong emotion, because it's been hardwired into us so strongly, we feel like we are. But whenever we look at risk, that's the way that our unconscious minds respond to risky possibilities. So this is why the fear setting exercise exists, to keep you from allowing your unconscious mind to run wild and have you feeling so fearful of a possible action that you never take any risk, which is what happens to a whole lot of people, and they're not even aware that that's what's happening to them and why they're not doing what they want to do in life. Point number 3. Today's topic is how to take the risk whenever you are in doubt in life, or whenever you're in doubt, just take the risk. Point number 3. Most people don't want to take risks in life simply because they are risks. That's what makes people not want to do them. People will tell you, maybe you've used this language yourself or heard someone use this language. They'll just tell you straight up, I don't want to do this thing because it's risky. And that's a good enough reason for a whole lot of people to not do something simply because there is a risk involved. They don't want to get involved. Most people have a plan to, quote, make it, close quote, in life in some safe and problem-free way. That's how most people set their goals, and they set their plans that they're going to make it. They will be completely safe. There will be no risk involved, and there'll be no problems that come along. And then when there are risks that come along, they don't do anything. They're stuck in the water because they don't want to take any risks. Or when problems come along, they don't know how to handle them because they weren't expecting the problems. They expected there to be this yellow brick road, rainbows and sunshine. And when it doesn't go that way, they have no idea what to do, simply because they didn't expect the things to happen. Not because it doesn't happen, but because they didn't expect it to happen. We often make plans that just assume everything's going to go perfect and the whole world is just going to align with our goals and get out of our way so we can do what we want to do. 99.9% of the time doesn't work out that way. Is this true or not true? And wouldn't we all like things to work out that way, though? For you not to have to take any risk and for there to be no problems whatsoever, but it never happens that way. Yes, we would love it, but it never happens that way. So, and this is one time that I'm going to use this word reality. We need to face the reality of the fact that there will be problems anytime you have a goal in life. There'll be problems with getting to that goal, and there will be risk involved in getting to any goal that is worth getting to. And sometimes to solve problems in life, you need to make moves that may not work. Sometimes to solve a problem, you may need to take a risk. Anything that you do that you're not quite sure that is going to work out, you're not 100% guaranteed that it's going to work out, which is most of the things that we do, that's a risk. Why? Because you're putting something on the line. You're putting your time, your effort, your energy, your attention, your focus, maybe your money on the line to do something that might not work out. If it doesn't work out, then that means that time, attention, energy, focus, the money that you put into it, that's the opportunity cost of your effort. You had to give that up in order to try, but you still didn't get the outcome. That's a risk. And the more resources you had to put into something that could possibly not work, the bigger the risk is that you're taking. Here's the thing about risk, though. The more that you risk, the more you stand to gain. But at the same time, right next to that sentence, well, I'll also say this: the more that you risk, the more you stand to lose. Most people cannot stand the possibility of losing so much. Therefore, they never risk that much. Therefore, in turn, they never invest that much into what they're trying. Therefore, even if they succeed, their rewards are not great because they didn't invest a lot. There's no reward unless the risk is taken. Anything that you do that might not work as a risk, and most people try to minimize how many risks they partake in. So for you, here's what you need to understand. Here's where your advantage comes in. The competition is fewer because there are so few people willing to risk. There are so few people willing to do things that they see as risky. The competition is very thin in doing things that are risky. So what you need to do, here's what you need to do. You're a reasonable, logical person, right? Look at the areas in whatever it is you're involved in that most people, the average person, logical person, would see as risky. All right, it would be risky to try that. It'd be risky to do this. It'd be risky to make that investment. It'd be risky to put a lot of what we have into that thing. Find out where those risks are in the mind of the average person. This is where you got to step out of your own mind and start thinking how your competitors may be thinking. Figure out where they see risk as maybe too much for comfort, and that's where you should invest, because that's where the biggest opportunities are. Now, again, make sure you're doing the fear setting exercise that I gave you in point number 2. So you're making logical risks that make sense, that you can recover from if they don't work out, because just because you risk something doesn't mean you're going to win. But once you figure out where that opportunity is, those are the places where you can win the biggest, because you have, first of all, you're able to invest so much that when you win, there's a whole lot that you get back. And second of all, because you have very little competition. So even if you're not that great, you don't have that many people you got to beat. The fishing is best where the fewest people go. Point number 4, today's topic is when in doubt, take the risk. Most people think that they want to live a life that has as little risk as possible. Now, most people may not say that, but they unconsciously live that way. That you're trying to avoid risk as much as possible. You want to get through life. You want to succeed. You want to reach your goals. You want to get to where you want to get to, but you don't want to have to deal with too much risk. But if you really think about it, where's the fun in a risk-free life? Think about the most fun that you've had in your life. The times that were most fun, the periods in life, the jobs that you worked on, the projects you've been involved in that were the most fun. The ones where you could tell a story and people are interested in hearing that story. What are those situations? I'm pretty sure those situations are the ones in which there was risk involved. You know how I know that? Because who the hell wants to hear a story where there was no risk? All right, it's not a story. I want to hear a story of you had a goal to do something. You were at point A, you had a goal to get to point Z, you had a plan of getting there, and there were no problems, and you never had to take a risk. There was never a point where it looked like you might lose. There was never a point where you were down. There was never a point where you had to basically bet everything on one roll of the dice. You never had to do that, and then you ended up at point Z and everything worked out perfect. I want to hear that shit. Who wants to hear that story? I don't. It's not interesting. Interesting story is the one where there's some kind of risk involved. There's something that got put on the line. The interesting story is a story in which you get to a point where you decide to do something that most people would not do. That's what makes a story interesting. You know why people like to hear stories? Because we want to hear somebody tell us about something that we never did ourselves, something that we have thought about doing, but we never actually did, something that we considered doing, but we said it was a little bit too risky, so we didn't do it. So we want to hear about how you did it and it worked. That's what makes a story interesting. If everything in your story is something that I've already done, something that I don't think is risky, something that I don't think nothing got put on the line, something where nobody could possibly lose, where everything just worked out perfect, that's a boring ass story. Nobody wants to hear it. It's not even a story. You don't even bother telling that story. Because you know, without even thinking about it, unconsciously you understand that's not interesting. Who the hell wants to hear that? There's no stories to tell where there are no risks being taken. If you're never pushed to figure things out on the fly, I mean, right there on the spot, you got to figure something out. You got to make a decision that could spell the end of your opportunity or the beginning of a new opportunity. That's what makes a story. If you never face the possibility of losing, which means you will never really win. Risk is the safest way to ensure that you reach your potential. I'm going to say that one more time. Risk is the safest way to ensure that you reach your potential. Because I'm making that statement assuming that your potential is very high, that your potential is much higher than that of the average individual who has no goals, who's not doing any personal development, who's not trying to make themselves better and more valuable. I'm assuming that you're that type of person. You're going way above the average. The safest bet for you to reach your potential is to take on more risk. Doesn't mean reckless risk. It means smart risk. That's why I gave you the fear setting in point 2. But if you're not taking on any risk, it's very difficult for you to reach your potential. It'll be damn near impossible. Now let's recap today's topic, which is when you are in doubt, always take the risk. Every life is a combination of decisions that we make, and we make a lot of decisions every day that we don't even think about. And most of the time we make safe decisions, the ones that don't disturb anyone or anything, keep us anonymous, keep us in the background, easy to ignore, easy to forget. We even ignore and forget ourselves. There's a reason for this, because staying away from risk keeps us out of trouble, at least on a day-to-day basis. But there's bigger trouble looming in the long run of not taking risks that we usually don't notice until it's too late, that we haven't taken any risks. Therefore, we're so far away from our potential. We never do anything worth doing. We never achieve anything worth achieving. We don't have any stories worth telling, and we don't become a person worth paying attention to simply because there's no risk involved in our lives. So staying away from risk is actually the riskiest thing you can do. And today I'm explaining that. Point number 1. Episode 389, I told you cannot dunk without jumping. The most coveted rewards require risk. They don't ask for it. They don't suggest it. They require it. If they didn't, everybody would have the most coveted rewards and they would no longer be the most coveted rewards. Point number 2, the fear setting exercise is a logical way of assessing your risk before you take them so you can reasonably justify your risk. The questions are, what is the worst case scenario? Can I recover from the worst case scenario? How would I recover from the worst case scenario? What's the potential payoff for the worst case or the best case scenarios versus each other? The worst and the best versus each other. If the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario payoff and the amount that I would have to put in, the opportunity cost, the probability of each one occurring, if the best case scenario one just seems like a better deal, why not take it? If your payoff will be bigger and you can recover from the possible loss, what do you have to lose? Come up with an answer to that question before you do it. Point number 3, most people don't want to take risks simply because they're risks. People can use the fact that something's risky as the only reason that they need to do nothing. Most people have a plan to make it somewhere in life with no risk, completely safe, and 100% problem free. We would all love things to work out that way, but you tell me if that's ever happened in your life or anything that mattered. Sometimes to solve problems, you got to make moves that might not work. You might need to make a decision on the fly, but the competition is less. The fishing is best where the fewest go, where you are taking the most risk. That's why nobody else is there. Point number 4. Most people think they want as little risk as possible. If you think about it, there's no fun in a risk-free life. Nobody wants to hear a story of a person who never had to take a risk. There are no stories to tell. If you never pushed yourself to figure things out in the moment on the fly, you never had to make a decision that could change everything right there on the spot with no time to think about it, hem and haw, and consult 20 other people to see what they think. If you never face the possibility of losing, you can never really win. Risk is the safest way to ensure that you reach your personal potential. Work on your game.